Chaos. That's what Double Dash has introduced into the Mario Kart series. Sure, the games always had random items that were conducive to casual fun. The actual power-up pool and their probabilities differing depending on player position would equalize the playing field, making sure that everyone has a fighting chance if not to win, then at least to considerably get ahead. But if you actually look at the Grand Prix circuits of the first several Mario Kart games, you don't get to pick up power-ups that often. For example, in the first most basic track in each of the previous games, you get 1-2 chances at most to get a pickup. Now, should we check the very first most basic track of Double Dash, and we'll find 5 possibilities to pick up an item, more than twice than before on a track that really is not that large. Double the chaos, double the fun! And yet, it's a racing game, skill is still a factor. Your chances of winning are obviously going to be higher if you master broader aspects like knowledge of tracks and best shortcuts within them, and lower-level mechanical aspects like drifting, which can boost you a bit. Mario Kart controls are very simple, and yet within that simplicity the game adds a certain amount of depth. However, in a configuration like this, it is not uncommon for chaos and skill to be at odds with one another. I'm sure everyone who has ever played one of the modern Mario Kart games has a story of doing everything right, but then losing all the advantage because someone got lucky with a red shell pickup, let alone far stronger effects like the minimizing lightning and the spiny blue shell targeting whoever is in the first position, both specifically designed to drastically change the configuration of the race in the name of casual fun. Of course, there are certain strategies skillful players can use to mitigate and sometimes, with their luck themselves, prevent anybody else's luck from drastically impacting their performance, but the dichotomy still persists and at times it can be disheartening to say the least. Double Dash, though, despite being the culprit of injecting so much chaos into the series, actually feels fair. In general, randomness and luck as principles are not necessarily the enemy of skill and mastery. Trading card games, for example, are inherently random due to the nature of shuffling decks every time you play, but there are means to control that randomness, nudge it in a certain direction thanks to aspects like deck building. Double Dash double exclamation mark has a core selling point that might feel like a gimmick, especially considering that it hasn't been featured with the same implementation in any Mario Kart before or since, at least at the moment of writing this. And yet, that selling point not only marries the facets of chaos and skill, but also pushes them both forward. I'm talking of course about 2 characters riding on a single cart. What does that mean in practice though, mechanically speaking? There are 2 item slots, one per each character, but only the one in the back can actually use the item since the front one, even if they're holding something, is busy driving. But you can switch between them at will, and sometimes have to because if the character in the back is already holding a power-up, then you can't pick anything up for the driver unless you bump into a double item box. It's worth pointing out that when a cart is hit in certain circumstances, both helpful and offensive items the rear character held get dropped onto the road, and anything that's on track, regardless if it was put on purpose or accident, stays there, well, not indefinitely, but for a very long time. Combine that with increased pickup frequency, and as you progress, there's more and more banana peels to avoid, green shells bumping around, failing to find where to go out of bounds. It's madness. And it's fun! Especially considering that each of the 16 racetracks is expertly designed, even those that might feel jarring at first, like Dry Desert with a huge sinkhole, and the Sherbert Land with slippery ice segments. My personal favorite is DK Mountain, where you ride into a huge barrel that shoots you to the top of a, well, mountain, and then you have to make your descent through a perilous, winding path, avoiding chasms, holes, and trying to stay on a shaky bridge. But there are plenty of other great courses like Daisy Cruiser with various levels and moving objects, Mushroom City with multiple rows to choose from, Baby Park, which is just a small circle with 7 laps and... with all the items flying around, may the Lord have mercy on your soul, so good. And if you want, you can play with others not just competitively, but in co-op, with each person controlling one character, so you have to coordinate when to switch from driving to item usage. And on your first attempts, you're most likely going to be so bad at coordinating different actions, who drives when, who uses what, that for a while, co-op is its own unique brand of hilarious chaos. But the double character mechanic isn't just about adding more to the chaos, but also about adding more to the element of mastery. specifically an actual layer of active strategizing. Traditionally, Mario Kart games have what can be called passive strategizing. You don't necessarily have control over stuff that happens to you, but when it does happen, you are making choices. For example, to get what I mean, in most Mario Kart games you get an item and then decide if you want to use it now or maybe keep it for later, while considering whether it's useful for defense in the moment, since while an unused item rotates around you, it can actually block opponents' power-ups. That is not a thing in Double Dash. Characters hold items in their hands, and if you want to use them defensively, you have to do so manually. For example, if there is a red shell behind you, to protect yourself from it, you have to throw back another shell or a banana peel. It takes a bit of practice, but this time the strategy layer is active. You have control and therefore have to make a specific choice whether you want to keep this item for later, and if you do, you can switch characters to make use of the second slot. You don't just wait for the perfect moment for that item to be useful, you specifically choose and plan for it. This is also seen in how Double Dash handles shortcuts, most of which require a speed boost from a mushroom to be traversed successfully. And therefore, there is midterm planning. If you get a mushroom, do you keep it for the shortcut or do you use it to overtake an opponent? Tracks in Double Dash aren't always very wide, so you can choose where to set up a trap of some sorts with banana peels or fake items, but be sure to not fall into it yourself later. The aspect of width is particularly interesting considering that in future games the recreated tracks from Double Dash are far wider. Even in Mario Kart Wii, which reuses the exact geometry from GameCube, it's scaled up so there's still more space. But the relative crampiness is imperative for planning item usage, which is but one layer for strategizing. There is a reason why the item switching is represented through two different characters, not just an extra inventory slot. There are 19 item pickups in Double Dash, but only 9 are always put into the random pools of each track. The rest stay out of the pool entirely unless you control a character who adds them in specifically for your team, not anyone else. For example, Fireball will be in your random item pool only if you have Mario or Luigi in your team. Protective Hearts only if you have Peach or Daisy. Chain Chomps are available only for Baby Mario and Baby Luigi, and so on. Though keep in mind that the position also matters for probability like with every other item, so you won't get chain chomps while in the front, but when in the back, once again you can decide whether to use them now to try and regain position advantage, or keep it for later. Now, the game prioritizes the character on the back when it comes to probabilities of a special item, so you might want to put two characters with the same special to increase the chances of getting them, or two characters with different specials to create a combo that you find useful for your playstyle. You're essentially making a trading card game mini deck and nudging the probabilities of item generation in favor of your overall strategy. And just keep the aspects you don't like or don't suit your playstyle out. The choice of characters though also affects which cart you'll be driving. For example, both Diddy Kong and Donkey Kong have a giant banana power, but Diddy is light and Donkey is heavy. There are 3 overall kart types, light, medium and heavy, which is not an entirely new concept for the series. But what is new is the fact that which karts you can use correspond to who is the heaviest member of your team. They all have very different handling, which actually doesn't matter that much for casual play, but is important to consider if you're trying to master the game. Light cars have lower top speed but very good acceleration. They can be easily pushed away by heavier cars, however they don't lose that much speed when going off-road. Heavy cars are essentially the opposite. They have high top speed but low acceleration, are resistant to being pushed, however without speed power-ups going off-road is really not recommended. And medium cards are naturally something in between. Every specific card has some smaller differences, so even within a single category they're not exactly the same, but the overarching principles apply to all. There is another gameplay mechanic that I didn't mention, the possibility to steal items from other characters in the back, but since when controlling a card alone you can do it only when bumping during a speed boost, with an additional method in co-op where you can perform a specific move, it's not something as consistently relevant as the other elements. But still, all these mechanics add a very important feeling, that of control, of agency, of strategizing, a feeling that is imperative for randomness to seem fair, because you're not just subject to it, You can nudge and influence it, and that feels satisfying. Of course, if you're a casual player, you can ignore all that and play just based on vibes. Double Dash is really easy to pick up and play, you don't have to ever worry about switching characters yourself to have fun. In fact, should you pick up a double item power-up for both characters and use one, the game will automatically switch the driver and backseat character around. This avoids raising the skill floor in comparison to traditional one-item slot Mario Kart games. And yet, as a result of all the changes and additions, Double Dash is, if not the only Mario Kart, then at least one of the few Mario Kart games where dropping from first position to second, fourth or even eighth never seemed like bullshit to me and always felt fun regardless. This statement will definitely not age well when I will break my controller after getting a lightning blue shell double whammy, but you know what I mean. As a rule of thumb, whenever shit happens, I know exactly what I could have done differently to better adapt. And if it's not the end of the race, I have enough avenues to regain advantage. There is a lot of randomness in Mario Kart Double Dash, but when a failure occurs, it rarely feels like I was just unlucky that I didn't have the necessary tools to resolve the situation. The game gives me the possibilities to make sure I have all the tools I need, and that's the true genius of Mario Kart Double Dash.